I've had this Camaro for a long time, and when I first built it, I was going for minimal. So it has manual steering. It came from the factory with manual steering, and I just kept it. But after driving it with manual steering, I can really say that I don't like it one bit. But to be fair, my issue may not be the fact that it has manual steering. It might be just because my steering box is worn out. So when I drive this thing, it tends to get a little squirrely on the road. Not rear end squirrely, but front end squirrely, which is a little bit scary when you're driving down a straight road and all of a sudden it's kind of jolting to the left or right, because what'll happen is it seems to catch the ruts in the road that are left by semis, and there's a lot of play in the steering wheel, so by the time you take up that slack and correct, you're already a foot to the left or a foot to the right, and it gets a little scary. So I'm going to be putting power steering in here, and I think it's going to help out a lot. It'll tighten up the steering and hopefully fix all the issues, because I really haven't even driven this thing for a couple of years. But let's take a look at the parts I got. So what I got was the classic performance parts, or classic performance products power steering kit. The kit comes with this, what do you call that? The steering box. It comes with these hoses. It comes with a new rag joint. I guess this is an upgrade. And it comes with a Pitman arm and a couple fittings for your steering box and the power steering pump. And then I had to buy the brackets for mounting it. This one, that one, and the pulley. And then I had to get some bolts for mounting it. All in all, this was a lot of money, and when you buy this, it's not going to come painted. I painted that. So that's what I got. That's what we're going to put in. Let me see if you can see this. So this wheel, that's about how much I got before I get any tension. Don't know if we can see it here. But yeah, I don't like it. I've got to reset my wiper blades. Up until a couple days ago, I never had working wipers on here, and technically I still don't. But when I got those parts and I painted them, I also painted the wiper motor. But I realized that when I hooked the wiper motor up, it made these wipers go from here to here. So that's why they're like that. So I got to get a tool to pull these off and reset them in the right spot. Let's take a look under the hood and kind of get a plan of action. I'm going to have to pause here. Alright, so what we're dealing with. Let me get some lighting. Alright, so the plan. What I want to do first is change out the steering box, because looking at the new one compared to this one, I really hope that's visible. It's a little bit bigger. Now, when I bought these headers, I think there was an option that said power steering or manual steering. In retrospect, I should have just went ahead and got the power steering ones, because there would have been more clearance. So now I think what's going to happen is, once I get this this manual steering box out, I think I'm going to have to dent this primary here, because this little top cover, this seems to be like triangular, and the other one is squared. I think it's going to hit that, so that's probably something I'm going to have to deal with. And so that bracket, the new brackets, the bracket is going to have to mount down here. So I'm going to have to move this grounding strap. I'm going to have to take that off. I think I'll relocate it to the other side, because you should have a grounding strap. If you don't have a grounding strap in your engine, I've heard stories of how the engine would ground itself through the crank. So you don't want a little arcing going on between your bearing surfaces, so that's why you need a grounding strap. So that one bracket's going to go down there, And then the other bracket, I think it's going to go on the motor mount back there. And then there is a boss up under here. So I think I'm gonna need to take the alternator out for, well, I think I could do it with the alternator in, but for filming purposes, I think it would be better if I take the alternator out. But that's a step we're gonna come to later. And then I may need to get a 2-groove pulley for the crank there. I haven't really been able to find the information I need for belt routing, so I think it's gonna be, I'm just gonna have to get that power steering pump in there and see what it looks like. But I'm thinking that I'm gonna need a 2-groove pulley. But first, before I lift this up, what I need to do is unbolt this rag joint. Because once you get this in the air, it's gonna be spinning all over the place, and it's gonna make it kind of hard to unbolt it, because the bolts could be tight or nuts. I can't remember if it has bolts or nuts, one way or another. So here's a better look at what I need to do next. I need to unbolt that bolt and that bolt, and then there's like another bolt here that clamps around this shaft. But these spark plug wires are in my way, so I'm gonna pull them out. Can't really film that because they're usually on there really tough, so I'm just gonna pause it and pull them. So luckily, the bolt on that shaft was pointed straight up, so I can get to that easily. Wow, look at all that play. And that is a 12-point bolt, 7/16 socket. So you're gonna need a 12-point socket. Okay, I got all those bolts out. So I kind of noticed a few things. First, this brake line right here, it runs right under the steering box, between the steering box and the Pitman arm, so I'm not sure how that's gonna work out. And then I remembered I took all my pickle forks to my shop because I kind of decided that I was never gonna need them at my house anymore. So I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to stop and get my pickle forks. But next step, need to lift the car up, take this wheel off, pull the Pitman arm, probably get a pickle fork and knock it loose from the tie rods, and we'll see. Okay, we are in the air. I vacuumed a little bit too, trying to make it look like I keep up on everything. Reality is I don't. Let's see. Looks like I didn't scuff that oil pan good enough before I painted it. Oh well. Alright, this is difficult. So here's the Pitman arm. Oh, that's a big nut. I don't have a socket big enough for that here. Yeah, I think I need to take it off because of that brake line. Unless I were to undo the brake lines, but I'd rather not do that. I might just have to continue this tomorrow. That's no big deal. I turned the wheel to make this go that way. I think if I could get this to separate, I could take this brake line and just kind of pull it and pop it over, and then I could drop that. Okay, so I was able to get it to come undone, so I'm just gonna try to pull this up and over. This probably isn't really a good idea, but it's what I'm gonna do. Okay, and then I'll straighten that back out a little bit. Okay. And this was all pretty worn out, that joint. So maybe that's part of the problem. All right, so now I need to get these two bolts. I thought there was a third one. Oh yeah, there's a third one. these 3 bolts out, and then the steering box will fall down. I'm sure it's gonna be heavy too, so I should probably make sure that brake line is really out of the way. And we'll see. Here's the old manual steering box. Wonder if it has any value. I mean, it doesn't feel terrible, like right here in my hands, but I guess over, like, through the steering column and through the wheels and everything, it tends to head up. Okay, so that one was a little tough to get out. So imagine that one's gonna be a lot harder to get in. I think I need to put the rag joint on there first. So I would have to line that up with the steering column too. I mean, I suppose I could just, if it doesn't work out, I could just try it again. Yeah, I'm gonna put that on there. See how it goes. I might need to end up taking the steering column out. It's not really a big deal, but I'm gonna try to get that up in there. Didn't I say I was gonna have to dent the header? So that's kind of seeming like what needs to happen right now. Okay, so I got it pretty close, but I am definitely going to have to dent the header tubes, or tube, right there. Basically it needs to go like a 1/2 inch more up and to the right. So I think that's what's gonna have to happen. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it. Maybe I can put a chisel right through here and hit it. That's hard to do. Maybe I should use a jackhammer. Alright, I got that steering wheel pulled. Maybe that'll make it work. Maybe. Since all that pounding and denting made less room, I'm gonna try something different. I kind of ground the areas that were hanging up. And then this one, I took the lock washer out from behind that bolt because that was banging against another pipe. So hopefully I don't need warranty work ever. Try it again. Well, I have one bolt started. That doesn't mean everything, but that's a pretty good sign. I can still see it hitting that primary tube, and this has to go up just a little bit still, but if I get that one started, maybe I can put a jack under there now and make it do what I want it to do. But I'll do some more denting. So I'm just gonna keep pounding on more. Oh yeah, and when you do this, when you hammer like something, a lot of people do this, they go, and it's really annoying. Just hit it. You don't need to do a practice swing each time. You know, you're kind of in the way. Just a little bit. What's it look like? Am I doing it right? Okay, it's in there and I got all 3 bolts in. Now that took me about 6 hours, so obviously I can't really show it all. So I'm pretty much gonna edit most of it out, but if you got long tube headers and they're for manual steering, 6 hours is about what it's gonna take. So that was pretty terrible. And I'll get the camera right in there. That's how much I had to dent that. And I took the steering box out a few times and I ground a lot of it off of there. There's actually a little bit of space there, but it's definitely touching on this one. So I don't know, I suppose it's gonna send a lot of vibrations through the steering wheel. Oh well. All right, next I need to put the bolts back in there. I already put the steering column back in, but I need to get these bolts in and tightened up before I tighten the steering column back into the body, so I'm gonna do that. Okay, so I got those bolts started, but now I'm at the point where I can't tighten them down because as I try to tighten it, the steering shaft is turning. So I went ahead and I hooked up the Pitman arm and the ball joint into it. I didn't tighten it down, I just kind of stuck it in there. I think I'm probably going to tighten it down when it's on the ground. So at this point, I need to put the wheel back on and put it back on the ground, I think. I might have to lift it back up later, but right now that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put that wheel back on and put it back on the ground. Where we are at. So I've got the Pitman arm installed and I've got it bolted to the steering box and to the tie rods. So that's all set up and I've got it's parallel. So the way the Pitman arm works, it's keyed. You have a key that way and a key that way. And also your steering box, it can turn so many times before it locks itself. So I had to play with that a little bit. I had to keep spinning it back in this way and that way, back this way, you know, until I got it centered. So I got that set up. And the steering wheel is also square. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine when you don't have a square steering wheel. So I've got everything ready, but if you look at this, the wheel is kind of kicked out this way a little bit. So that's an alignment issue. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do any alignment work, but it looks like that's the way it's gonna go. And it's not a huge deal. I mean, it's a little bit of a deal because I can't exactly take this to an alignment shop because the car is lowered. I have these adjustable upper A arms, and I've tried to take an alignment shop before, and they just couldn't do it right, you know, because they just wanted to enter it in the computer, and the computer was going to tell them how to do it, and it just doesn't work that way. And actually, it was aligned worse than when I brought it in. So I ended up taking it back and align it myself. So what I do for an alignment, I should really make a video on that because it's pretty useful the way I do it, but it's a very involved process. But what I would do is I would put the car up on 4 jack stands, and then I would put the lug nuts, I'd take the wheels off and I put the lug nuts on tight against the rotors, and then in the back I would start there. I'd take like the top lug, and I'd put a piece of flat steel, it's about 2 feet long, hole drilled in the center, and I'd bolt it to the top lug hole. So then I have like a 2-foot plane across the rear wheel well, and I have plumb bobs from both ends of the steel, and then I'd measure over so I could get a spot out here, and I'd put masking tape on the floor, you know, like 12 inches away. Then I'd have a piece of masking tape, and then I would set up a laser beam, and the laser beam would shoot down here, and I'd put more masking tape here, and then I would do the same thing on the front with that piece of steel. So I would have a piece of steel bolted to the top lug on both sides, and there'd be a flat plane over here and here. You know, again, I'd hang plumb bobs down to the floor, and then I would use a tape measure, and I'd measure over to this piece of tape I would set here, and that's how I align things. It's just a lot of setup time, and it'd be a real pain to sit there and try to video it, so I'm not going to do that. But after I get everything installed and get this all buttoned up and finished, then I'm going to do that. But so next I need to get all this stuff in here done. So I'm going to start by removing the alternator. And so what you want to do first is disconnect the battery. And to be quite honest, if I wasn't filming, I wouldn't disconnect the battery, but you're trying to set a good example, so I'm going to disconnect the battery. And when you disconnect a battery, you always want to do the negative first. If you're working on a truck or something where you got 2 batteries, 1 on each side, you would disconnect both the negatives first, and then you move on to the positive. And because the thing is, like, if you're wrenching on here, you're taking off a negative. If you turn your wrench and you ground it somewhere, nothing's going to happen. If you start on the positive and you're wrenching and you ground the positive, it's going to arc and potentially blow up the battery. So that's why you take the negatives off. Once you get both the negatives off, or just the negative if you have a single battery, you can take a screwdriver and run it from here right to a ground, and nothing's going to happen because you're not completing any circuit, because this is going nowhere if that's off. So that's why you do the negatives first. I got the alternator out. It was really tight in here, like this little bushing in here presses into the bottom mount, and it really made the alternator tight. Took the top bolt out, then that one, and I was able to roll it down. I put a bunch of cloths here to protect that. It's a shame I had to scratch up the paint there, but what can you do? And it's just bound to happen. And let's take a look at the alternator. Let's check this thing out. I took this all apart, painted the case, reassembled it. Almost like a show car, isn't it? Really, it probably is a show car, but I do drive it, and there's probably evidence down here. Well, it's too dark, but there's like a lot of little rock chips in here from the tires. That's the bad thing about putting wide tires on a car like this. They built them to roll under like that, so all the rocks come out, especially with the rear. So I have kind of sticky tires back there. Those tires, they were originally made for a Porsche, so they're like really sticky, but the back lowers are so chipped up. And what I should have done was put like a clear protective film on the lower here, and I ended up doing it in the back, but too late. Next part, I'm gonna remove this ground strap. It's just bolted to the mount for this upper control arm here, and then to the block. And I'm just gonna move it right over to the other side. There's a hole right here in the head. I can use that. And then same right here to the upper control arm. I can bolt it to that. Unless I can find a bolt down in the frame somewhere. I don't think there's anything good down there. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. You know, really what I should do is talk more about this car. You know, I kind of jumped into it, but that would really take too long for this video. You know, this video is all about the power steering. So I think what I'm gonna do is, like, this summer, maybe if I can ever get it plated, because right now there's a problem with the DMV. You got to go stand in line for 7 hours to do anything with the DMV. So I don't even have plates for this car, and I don't know if I can get them through the mail or not. I think I have to go to the DMV, but you know, that's all going to depend on that. But anyway, if I do get plated and I can drive it this summer, then I think what I'll do is I'll drive it out to my shop, and I'll like park under a tree or something, and I'll just spend like half an hour walking around talking about it. Maybe throw some pictures in there of when I was doing this build. Because when I got this car, it was just a primer shell. It was a piece of shit primer shell. It was, under the primer was tons of Bondo. Like, this was old school stuff where they just, if there was a rust hole, they just shoved Bondo in there and called it good. But this car, I replaced the quarters, I replaced the roof, I reskinned the doors, new fenders. I did a lot of lead work on like the roof seam and the firewall. I leaded all that, but I really can't. I'm not going to get into all that because it would just take too long. But so, you know, maybe this summer I can get a video like that. But you know, back to wrenching. Grounding strap is moved. By moving it over here, I was able to cut this much off of it, which really doesn't matter unless you're a race car driver. Weight savings, which I'm not a race car driver, but I still think it's cool anyway that I was able to cut that much off of there. I suppose you probably noticed this. So this is the fuel line, the way it's wrapped and all this. This is insulation. So I had an issue with this thing boiling the fuel. And originally when I built this car, I built the engine for a quadrajet. So this is a spread bore intake manifold. There was a lot of problems with the quadrajet, and a lot of people will say the quadrajet is quadra junk, but really it's not. It's really a great carburetor. So I had an 850 CFM quadrajet on here that I spent a lot of time building. I jetted it by hand, you know, with these little bitty drill bits, and I'd sit there and roll the drill bits through the channels to enlarge them to what I needed. But the problem was vacuum. Quadrajets are very vacuum dependent. An engine like this with a big cam doesn't produce a lot of vacuum, so at idle it couldn't atomize the fuel very well, and you had to have a certain RPM range for it to be atomizing the fuel correctly to make it go. So a lot of times this car, I'd hit the gas and it would kind of stumble and then take off, or sometimes I'd be at the right RPM and it would just go and it was great. But so anyway, I ended up switching to the Holley 750, which is a square bore, so I had to get an adapter in there. And after that, I realized that the quadrajet was actually masking a problem. It was masking that fuel boiling. So as soon as I switched to this, I started having issues. When I would park it, it would be hot, and I tried to start it, it wouldn't start. Or when I was driving it, stopping at a stoplight, it would start to sputter. And I decided it was fuel boiling. So I wrapped the fuel line in all this insulation. And actually, I just did this a little bit ago. This fuel line, it was down here right next to the header. Just a little bit ago, I pulled it up and moved it over there. But I think what I'm going to do, not in this video, is I'm going to take this fuel line and I'm going to disconnect it here and back there, and I'm going to slide it back, and I'm going to put it like on the outside of this wheel well under the A-arm and around there to keep it more away from the heat. So I just want to talk about why I've got all that ugly insulation in there. This is a bigger one because there's a fuel filter in there. All right, next we need to get those brackets in. So they're not over here. We'll grab them. We're going to start with this bracket. This one, it goes kind of down here. It's going to be impossible for me to film this, so I'm not going to. But you can see right there, that lower one goes right to the motor mount, and then this upper one, it goes to a boss right there. It's just impossible for me to film it, but you're just going to have to trust me. So I got to take the bolt out of that motor mount and then thread another bolt in the upper part. So that is next. Okay, I got that bracket in there. And I said earlier that I thought I could do that without taking the alternator out, but for filming I need to take it out. No, I really need to have the alternator out because I had to be down here and I had to stick my arm in there and turn the bolts from underneath to get it back in. had to use a box end wrench. I couldn't fit a socket in there. So that's in there now. So next, gotta put this bracket in. It's gonna go, I believe, like that. And it's going to use, I believe, that hole and that hole. All right, so I'm gonna get that one in. Bracket in. Next up, power steering pump. So this has some threaded studs. One needs to go right there and the other needs to go through here, and then put a bolt through that front bracket into the front there. So hopefully that just slides right in. I think this wiring harness, I think it can stay there. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So I'm going to leave it. That didn't quite go as planned, so I wasn't able to get the power steering pump in there with the bracket attached. So I had to take that bracket off and put them together as one and then attach it. But it's in there now. Next up, put the pulley on, then the hoses, but I gotta stop for the night because it's pretty late. And it is looking like I'm gonna need, yeah, that almost looks like might need a 3-groove pulley. Huh. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to like read some forums or something, try to figure out which pulley I'm gonna need for that crank, but it's definitely gonna need a different one. All right, until later. Setback. I tried to put the pulley on, but I can't make it go. Not even enough to get the nut on where I could tighten it on. So I'm gonna pull that all back off, take it over my workbench, and push it on there somehow. I had to unbolt my fan and drop it down because when that pulley was stuck on, there just wasn't enough room to pull it up and out through over here. So I unbolted that. I couldn't get it to come out because this pulley for the water pump was kind of interfering or something, but it's out of the way right now. But I should talk about this fan a little bit. I mean, I wasn't planning on doing any extra talking in this video, but this fan is kind of important. This came out of like a minivan or something. It's a really good fan. I can't remember what the part number was. I don't know if I could find it on here, but it's actually a 2-speed fan. I've only got a single speed controller. I put the controller right down here. That's it right there. And this is the temperature sender that controls it, and there's like a little knob I can turn to set out the temperature I want. But this fan can keep this engine as cold or as hot as I want it. And it would be nice if I had a 2-speed controller to it doesn't really run hot because the fan's so good, but it is taxing on your alternator, so you have to have a good alternator, otherwise it'll kill your batteries quick. Let's see what I got. Okay, so I'm thinking I'll probably just put a socket on here and just tap it a little bit, just enough where I can get this nut started, and then use that to pull it down. All right, I got that set. It actually wasn't that hard to get on. I just didn't have the keyway in the right spot. So a little bit of chips, what can you do? But I managed to damage this nut while trying to use that to push it on with that keyway being in the wrong spot. So I'm gonna have to get another one of those. But I think I can go ahead and put this back on. I think that'll be fine. So here's how that's looking. And I was able to find some information on the crank pulley down there. So what I could have done was got an add-on pulley, which would have looked something like this, only not as extreme. Would have been flipped around, and it would have bolted to there. There would have been the crank pulley, then a little bit of a gap where the cone is, and then another pulley. Or I can get a 3-groove pulley. So I ordered a 3-groove pulley. The middle groove will just be empty, but then the 3rd groove will power this. So that's how that's gonna go. I gotta wait on that to come, plus the belt. And then this fan, I just bent these in my vise a long time ago. Drilled 3 holes and used a couple tapping screws, and that is how this is held on. Just kind of like that. And then there's 2 more on the bottom. Do it the same way. Imagine I probably had this radiator out when I did that. I think I probably just laid it down on its face and fit the fan to it. But yeah, I'm gonna get that button back up, and then it'll be the hoses next. So this end is easy enough to figure out. This one slides over that tube. That one has a larger fitting that can only go into the pump, so that's no big deal. But the other end is a different story. Does this one go into here, or does it go into here? That I don't know, so I got to figure that one out. I've made a determination. This hose, while it would work with a stock engine with manifolds, it's not going to work for this. What I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to go get this end cut off and have a 90-degree end put on there, and then after that it'll be able to come straight up out of there. So it'll come straight up out of here, and then it's gonna lay right here and go right into there. And as for directions, I found, because I was having trouble figuring out which one, I found an embossment on this end here. There's an arrow that points up, so that would indicate this one is the return over to the reservoir. So yeah, I gotta take that hose and I've gotta get a 90 put on it. So that's where I'm at now. Another day. I got this hose in. It's not how I wanted it, but I took it to the hydraulic shop and they didn't have a fitting for that one, that end. So because of this hose, this is kind of a crappy hose. So what they were gonna do is they were gonna make me an entirely new hose. So they got the piece of hose, they put that end on, and then they started doing this end. They realized, oh, they don't have a fitting for this end. So what ended up happening is they took my original fitting in the back, heated up with a acetylene torch, and bent it into a 90. There was no promises that it would work out, but it did work out. But now the 90 was too short, because I wanted it to come off and come straight up right through here, but the 90 was too short, it was interfering, so I had to turn it straight down and then roll it up around here. And how you tighten that one, I guess I got to lift the car up and tighten it from underneath. So I'm going to be doing that, but now I'm going to put the return hose on, and I did get my 3-groove pulley, so that's going to line up. Center groove will just be empty. But now onto the next hose. This return hose, it came with one of these little worm drive clamps. I don't like those. So I'm going to use one of the constant tension clamps, and I believe it's going to be this size, 5/8 to 23/32 of an inch. Yeah, I have quite a few of these. I need to get some for the radiator hoses, but I try to use these whenever possible. And these are great because they stay tight. With the worm drive clamps, when it heats up, it expands. When it cools down, it contracts. These are gonna expand and contract all the time. So that's why I really like those. And there we go. I could possibly shorten this up just a little bit, but I think I'm just gonna leave it. I got the clamp on down there. Gotta tighten both of those and the one underneath, but I'm gonna have to lift the car up for that. And I'll be back. I was able to get everything tightened up. That one, I was able to get under here without lifting the car up. Right between the sway bar and the cross member there, there's like a little slit like that. I was able to get the wrench in there and get little turns out of it. Got that one tightened up. And then these, I bought crowfoot wrenches a long time ago. This is the first time and probably the last time I'll ever use them, but I was able to use them for those. So those are all tightened. I stuck the belt on there just to make sure it was going to work. The nut, I looked for one locally, couldn't find one. They had the bin for it, but not one in stock. So I had to order that one, so I don't know when it'll be here. And now I just got to fill that with power steering oil. I got to take that belt back off and I guess spin it around by hand to see if I can circulate fluid through here. But first, best beer ever. That didn't work. I guess I'll just keep spinning it around by hand. I don't know if this is doing anything. I could probably use my vacuum bleeder to put a vacuum on that and pull fluid through. But it's not here. Well, look at that. Got the alternator back in. Just gotta get that nut, and I can start it up and see how it works. Still gotta put the cotter pin in the ball joint on the Pitman arm, but I'm gonna do that when I align it. And I might go ahead and make an alignment video. I might do that. So I got the nut. It was actually really cheap. It was like $2. $10 to ship it, but $2 nut. It's pretty cheap for a nut. Not really. But I'm gonna put that on, and then I guess I could start it up. It's still early enough in the day where it probably wouldn't bother the neighbors. Oh wow, that was really weird. I was putting the negative on, and I kept hearing like click, 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 and then this fan was going roo, roo. And I finally found the clicking. It was arcing right here. I'm like, what the hell is going on? It ended up being I had that light sitting in here, and it was arcing both these posts. And then, I guess, grounding through the garage's electrical system, completing the ground back to there. Wow. Can't believe that. Maybe I should put, like, yeah, I think I know what I could do. I have these things. I could put a couple of these on those studs. That'd be a good idea. Modern problems call for modern solutions. I mean, the chances of that ever happening again are pretty low, but might as well eliminate it. That's my fan controller there. Talked about it earlier. So I used that red one as a ground. I should have used black, but I didn't have black at the time. But this is a circuit breaker. This goes to the battery, I think. Yeah, it goes to the battery. It's right off the battery there because it needs a lot of power to turn that fan. And then the little hole right there is the adjustment. But anyway, there, that's better. Get a wrench and tighten that down and start it up. Oh. I don't even know if this will start because it's been sitting a while. Probably gonna want to get out of here, Drag. a minute. I could already feel and hear the engine hitting that exhaust pipe. Can't really do nothing about that. Maybe if I torque it enough, it'll dent itself in and then relax. Don't know. This thing has a mini starter too, so don't really want to burn that thing up. One of the things I've never did was get a voltage gauge for that, because this from the factory had an ammeter, but when you put in a high amperage alternator like this car needs, it could cause this thing to start on fire, so you don't want to run an ammeter with anything other than a stock alternator. Oh, I feel like I'm gonna have a backfire through the carburetor. Check the fluid. So I'm an idiot. I thought something sounded different, and I just remembered I never hooked up the spark plug wires back up on this side. So it was just running on the other side, which that's actually pretty impressive that it was running on only 4 cylinders. So I'm gonna hook those back up. That looks a little better. Alright, this is weird. I can't get the fluid to come through. I couldn't imagine the pump would be bad. I think it's more of an issue of it's lower. You know, it's down there and the fluid needs to get up here. I think there's just so much air in there. But I've actually got both of these lines loosened, you know, so it should be dumping fluid all over the place, but it's not. Fluid's just not coming through. So I'm not sure what's going on. I think I might need to bring home my vacuum bleeder and pull that off and pull a vacuum on it. I'll figure it out eventually. Okay, I was able to get it to pump for a little bit. I took the pressure side off and I hooked that piece of vinyl on there, and I did the old sucking method and I pulled fluid through there. Then I tightened it back down. I tightened it back down a little bit and loosened it. I started up and it drained out the reservoir there, and now I'm kind of back to it being full of air. So I'm gonna bring home my vacuum bleeder and pull this off and try to pull a vacuum on here, try to get full of fluid, and then try it again. All right, here's what I got here. I pulled the return line off and it's laying right there, and I got my vacuum bleeder hooked up to it. So now I'm trying to pull a vacuum and just pull some fluid through. So I'm gonna do that for a while. Okay, so that vacuum thing worked out. I don't see any leaks. I don't think I see any leaks. I'll have to look it over. Okay, that's it. Power steering is done. I still got to do the alignment on the front end, but as for this video, that's it. The engine for this car is currently in the machine shop. Maybe it'll be done this year, who knows. But I got to work on editing this video. It's probably going to be an hour-long video, but what can you do? You know, this kind of thing, it takes some time. But for this video, that's it, the end.